So welcome to another Adventures with Agile meetup. We're so happy that our community is growing and that you're all here today. Just to let you know about the Adventures with Agile community, we're now a global community here in New York as well as London, and we have a small base in Toronto, and we're trying to grow other places as well. We are a community first and foremost, but we also run training to kind of give to our community and grow our community. And our next course is running in New Jersey on New Jersey City on the 27th of March, and that's Agile Team Coaching. So that's about bringing professional coaching targetedly, in a targeted way, that's more of a word, into your Agile coaching practice and developing that. So I'm so happy we've got Antoinette here tonight. She's a very good friend of mine. She's also one of the best coaches I've ever met, and she's personally inspired me a lot. I met her in London training with Lisa Atkins, and then I went and joined her out in South Africa to launch that same course there for the first time, and I got to know the Agile community in South Africa, and it was such an amazing place to be. They're very dedicated to what they're doing, and yeah, I'm blown away, so much so that I went back again a year later and trained some of my courses out there. So a big place in my heart for the South African Agile community and for Antoinette. Okay, so she's going to talk to us tonight about the 7 myths of, for me, organizational agility. All right, thank you very much, Antoinette.
Thank you. Okay, so let's start off by talking a little bit about organizational agility. So I'd like to see who of you around here has gone beyond agility in your organization, in your IT organization. Who's gone beyond IT, Scrum in the technical organization? That's his show of hands. Okay. So the whole business agility conference as well is a testimony that we've gone beyond that. But there's been a long path. Okay. So I want to share my story with you, and it's not because my story is anything special, but it's because it's echoed in the community of other enterprise coaches that I work with and across the world. Okay, so I started in 1996, before it was even called Agile. Started in 1996 with XP, and that's really what was around in those days. XP, it was early Scrum, early XP, and it was something that was focused on the engineering practices, on actually writing code. Okay, so I actually moved to the States in 2000, and in 2001 I worked for a company here, and we brought that incremental iterative, so more than just engineering practices which we learned from Fowler, we brought that into organizations here. 2001 obviously was also the year that the Agile Manifesto came about. Okay, so I went back to South Africa via the Netherlands, and everywhere that I went, I realized that this incremental iterative way of working, which was by now called Agile, is something that could really make a difference to people's lives, and make a difference to project successes. In those days, I was very much project-based, so you would do an Agile project. You would, have to build a new piece of software, and you would have to, you would think about, okay, let's do this with agility. Okay, so I became an Agile mentor at that stage. I'd been an Agile team member up to then, but then I started working with people to show them how to break down things into smaller iterations so that you could build a little bit at a time. Okay, in 2009, I moved to coaching now not only projects, but actually organizations that wanted to bring an Agile way of working into their organization. So now it was not a project methodology anymore. It was something that you did. It was a way of working. Okay. I learned in the same year, about Agile coaching. It was around about the time, I'm not sure exactly when the white paper on what an Agile coach does, when it was published by ACI, by Lisa and Michael Spade. But for the first time, when I looked at that, I realized, okay, that's actually what we're trying to do. So that's really when the profession, 2008, 2009, is really when the profession of Agile coach, when that came about. Okay. In 2010, I had a very interesting experience. I was working with 2 teams in the same department, and as a team coach, got them up and running, really improving the way that they work. Okay, and about a year later, I went back. They said to me, "Please, won't you come back and just tell us, how are we doing? Are we doing?" Because they were after 3 months, they were really very well off and working really well. Went back in 2011, and half the team had left, and the other half were ripping their hair out. Okay, coming up against the organizational barriers. So that's when I realized, okay, so maybe there's a thing here in the ecosystem. So it's not about building products only. We build products in a bigger environment or ecosystem. So that was a big realization for me, because now, we all like our work to be valued. And all of a sudden, spending 3 months with a team to get them up and running felt like a waste if a year later they're not in the same state or better. So I started working at a departmental level then. Went back to that department, and there were more teams in that department, and we looked at the end-to-end process inside that department. So then I started working at a business unit level. And it was only really in 2014 when I joined, it was an experiment at that stage, but when I joined a enterprise coach boot camp, that I felt like going home, like coming home, not going home. So this was for the first time I met with other people who had the same concerns, and we were struggling with the same things, and we were all really frustrated. Okay. Now the reason why I share this with you is because this is pretty similar. So I was a year or 2 behind how things developed in the bigger world out there, but this is pretty similar. The timeline to, the timeline of this is pretty similar to what was happening in the industry. So we started out with Agile team members. At some point we started doing Agile mentoring. At some point the whole profession of Agile coach emerged, and actually then it grew into the enterprise coach. So there's been a natural progression. Now that enterprise Agile bootcamp, and somebody's in the room with me, that was William sitting right at the back, that was with me on that course, taught me a model that was really, really useful. And for those of you who've done the ACI bootcamp, you will recognize the model. So instead of saying Agile is a set of practices, so you have to have stand-ups or, scrums and retrospectives, reviews, etc., it looked at it in a slightly broader way. Well, not a slightly broader way, much broader way. So the model works like this, it's got 4 quadrants like all good models. And all models are wrong, but some are useful. So the first thing is that we divide how we look at agility into a subjective, in other words, an internal experience, and an observable or an objective experience, So we'll talk a little bit more about what those are. Then we divide it further into a personal, something that's, that one person can do, and what the collective does. So the work comes from, have you guys heard of Ken Wilber? Okay, so he wrote the Theory of Everything, and like a whole bunch of other books. Very, very clever guy whose reading is like quite dense. So it was based on that integral model. So this is integral agility. So if we look at the subjective side, what are the things that on a personal level influence me? What makes me agile as a person? What makes us as a team agile? Okay. On the observable stuff, what are the competencies, the practices, the products? How do they influence agile? And from an organizational point of view, what are the things that we need in place in the organization to be agile? Okay. So what I realized at the time when I learned about the ecosystem and the impact, I realized that I'd been focusing on the mindset of people, getting people into an agile mindset, that I'd been focusing on building good collaborative teams, that I'd been focusing on competencies and practices and techniques and, all of the, even the technical practices. But this was where I was coming short. This was what was impacting what was going wrong. So if we look through the eyes, we can do this at a team level. So at a team level, there's certain things that are applicable to a team in all of these. But I want us to have a look at it from an organizational agility point of view. So if we look at the I quadrant, at the things that need to be in place and healthy for an organization to become healthy, all of those things have an impact on organizational agility. Our leaders, do they have vision? Have they communicated that vision with everybody? Do people feel engaged with that vision? Are they aligned in terms of purpose? Given what the new kind of organization looks like, is there a career path for me? Where am I going to grow to? Okay. So those are all the things in the I quadrant. We go to the we quadrant, sort of the culture and relationship. What are the values that we hold as a group, as an organization? What's our culture? What are the norms that we have? Do we have psychological safety? Am I able to speak my mind without being worried about that people will think I'm stupid or obstructive or negative? Okay. So that's our we quadrant. As an organization, what's the spirit of the organization? We often talk about that we quadrant as the smell of the place. In the it quadrant, we've got all the obvious things that we think about when we do Agile. So what are the skills that we need from a technical point of view? What are the roles that we need? Because we've actually introduced a whole bunch of roles with the Agile frameworks that didn't exist before. We are now, with business agility and organizational agility, we are looking into what should an HR department look like that supports an Agile organization. So we've just spent time at the Business Agility Conference, and the HR people really had several deep discussions about what does it look like. What do things like performance measurement look like in an Agile organization? How do we recruit people? Okay? How involved should the HR department be actually in recruiting people? Because surely if we've got self-organizing teams, they should be saying when they need somebody else, and they should be the ones that filter and interview the person to come and join their team. Okay? So we would even go as far as saying, what are the products that we put out there? Are the products that we put out there suited for the market? I remember about 3 years ago, we worked with a learning and development company that had custom built projects for every client, and somehow they made up that they can reuse and shrink wrap some of their products. Okay, did we not believe like that, in the software industry for a long time? If we build components, we would just be able to put stuff together and off we go. Well, so sometimes we have to rethink our products. Do we have the right products in the market? Okay, and then in our organizational architecture and environment, we think about what do we look like as an organization? How does our end-to-end value stream from when we've got an idea to when we've got a product, how does that look? Okay. The very interesting thing about this model is that it's not only two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. So one of the things that I want to point out is that organizational altitude is actually something we can, as an organization, be at different levels of maturity. Okay. So, yes. Okay. So, you're taking the words right out of my mouth. So I was introduced to Frederic Laloux's work. Okay. So I don't know if you guys have read a book called Reinventing Organizations. Okay, so the idea there is that organizational structures have to evolve, and they have evolved as we as human beings evolve. Okay, so when we were cave dwellers, we had certain organizational structures. Whoever was the strongest won. And over the years we've evolved into armies or churches, etc. And then we've actually moved most of the organizations that we work in today. The organizational altitudes are just indicated by colors. Are orange organizations. Orange organizations are places where we maximize stakeholder value. Okay, where we do lots of marketing because we want to get the biggest market share out there. Really making as much money and as much profit as possible is what our biggest aim is. Okay, so you'll recognize that in the organizations, most of the organizations that you work with. So as people, at the moment we're in the space where if you look at millennials are going, what, making money? Surely there must be more than making money, because they have a different way of looking at the world. And therefore the organizations that they are willing to enter into need to change in order for them to go. Okay, so that's a 5-minute summary of a really deep body of work. I would really strongly recommend that if you're interested in that, go and have a look at Frederick Laloux, okay, Reinventing Organizations. It's a really good read. Okay, so that's the whole picture. If you want to take a picture of the whole thing, there it is. What does this mean for us? Okay. Okay, I'll let you do that. So what does that mean for us? I mean, the first thing, obviously, is the fact that agility is much broader than what we originally thought. Scrum ain't agility. Okay, so Scrum is an agile framework that's really well suited to technical work, but there is so much more, so much more. Okay, great. So the very first myth is that agile is limited to the technical function. Okay, so, and it's a little bit, I got a lovely metaphor for that today. If agile is only implemented in your technical function, it's like having a Ferrari surrounded by a flock of sheep. Okay, so it can't go anywhere. It doesn't matter how fast it is, it can't go anywhere. So certainly we have to look at what is around it, and we've got clues in what we need to look at in terms of what the integral model tells us. Okay, so this goes for HR. We've spoken about HR a little bit. What other areas do you think that it goes for? Finance. Okay, and given that most of our organizations measure success, they're orange organizations, so they measure success on marketing. Yes. How much money they make? Absolutely. How much money they make. So we measure success generally in how much money we make. And we've got very old practices around things like budgeting, for instance. Very old practices around the way, how do we decide to allocate money to certain things? How do we measure project success? So traditionally in the world of project management, we would look at, are we within time? Are we within budget? Okay. And, did we deliver the scope that we set out 2 years ago? Did we manage to deliver that scope? Okay. So that may be a measure of success in terms of how close you stuck to your constraints. But what is the real measure of success?
Outcome.
Yeah, happiness, outcome. Yeah. So is the customer, does it actually solve the business problem that we are looking for? Okay. So we have to change finance. Finance has to start operating in a new way. And one of the if you're interested in the finance, and this is a really hard So we all know what we call them. We call them bean counters, and and they tend to be quite black or white, and things add up or they don't. So if you're interested in how do I relook at my finance, what ideas can I get, have a look at the beyond budgeting movement. Okay? So that's myth number 1. Okay? What do you think about the second statement? Increasing their agility should be the aim for every organization. Yes?
They don't even know. It needs to be on the radar.
It needs to be on the radar, yeah?
So it may not be suited for every organization.
It's not suited for every organization. So it would be harder to do in one organization rather than another, yeah?
It's not the best thing for your organization.
Yeah?
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, it's not the best thing. So agility is not the best thing for your
For
organization.
your organization.
Okay.
It will not work for your kind of organization.
Okay, it might not work. It might not be suited. Okay?
It doesn't have to be a goal.
Doesn't have to be a goal. Okay.
Actually, if you talk to people starting businesses,
Yeah.
founding companies, and so on, there is never a goal to have agility in the
Yes.
organization.
Yeah.
My point that there is no goal in reaching agility. Like when people start companies, businesses, they have some vision or mission, and there is nothing about agility in those missions.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Agility is not a goal of itself. Agile, we turn towards Agile because there's a problem that we think it will solve. Okay? So what's happened in the market is we're in the stage where the late adopters are getting on board. And the late adopters, a lot of the late adopters are getting on board because everybody else has gotten on board. Okay? If you ask an organization, when they get you in and they say, please come help us become agile or more agile, when you ask them about their why, it's things like, we want to be more productive. We want to be able to change faster. We want to be able to get our product to the market faster. Okay? We want to improve quality. So there are claims that people make about Agile that organizations hear and go, I want to do that. Okay? Unless the organization can figure out why they're doing agility, okay, it's pointless for them to pursue that as a goal. And in fact, to have a long-term view of that's the best practice. You know, Agile's best practice. We have to go best practice. Is probably going to create more problems for them than they have at the moment, because there's going to be an expectation placed on this Agile thing, you know, and it's not going to happen. My example is always, if people are not collaborating at the moment, why on earth would bring Agile would make them collaborate with one another or communicate with one another, you know? Just doesn't make sense, okay? So really, focusing on agility is a little bit like the tail wagging the dog. Agile is great for problems that we have in the world, because our world has become really complex. But it's one of the tools that we can use to cope with that complexity in the world. Okay? If we are looking to have 70% of our organization agile by the end of the year, we are missing the point completely. Okay. Third myth. You need to have a scaling framework. Okay, but let me say to you what my experience with SAFE is. Long before SAFE actually came out as a framework, I read the 2 books that Dean Leffingwell wrote. He wrote 2 books that formed the basis of SAFE. It was at the time when I was working with a department and trying to do an end-to-end decent agile flow in there. And I used some of the ideas that he put in the book. They are both really good books. Okay? So the problem with SAFE is that especially the late adopters, especially the organizations that need to really change stuff around their culture, uses SAFE as a vehicle to try and bring about changes that require other changes. The biggest ask in Agile is change your culture. And SAFE doesn't not talk about culture, but this looks like a recipe. Okay, so we're going to create these roles, these guys are going to report into that, we're going to have these. So people use SAFE for the wrong reasons, the intent of using SAFE. And SAFE's not the only one. You know, SAFE is just a very prevalent one. I know that it's prevalent here, it's prevalent in South Africa. So the ideas are great, but this is the problem. Okay, if you look at any one of the Agile mindsets, Agile frameworks, if you look at Scrum, for instance, Scrum, to a large extent, is a bunch of practices. Okay, it tells you you do this, you do that. It tells it in 16 pages. Okay, so Scrum's got its own principles and values as well, but really it's based on the principles and values that's set out in the Agile Manifesto. SAFE gives you a lot of practices and techniques and tools. If we only have that, and we don't have this, the most important thing at the bottom of it, okay, then it really is just, you know, like the proverbial lipstick on a pig. It does two things, okay? So management just sees it as a new way of working. So you are going to now work in this new way, okay? And for those there, the minions that have to start doing things in a different way, it's just a different way of doing things without understanding the why. So by all means, bring in a scale framework into your organization if you've already achieved this and it's embedded in your organization, but don't lead with a scaled framework. Okay. So, if we look at myth 4, it already starts speaking about that. So organizational agility is for the people down there. Okay? So you must have seen that little cartoon that says, who wants change? Everybody's hands go up. Who wants to change? And, you know, quite a few hands go. Who wants to lead the change? Nobody. Okay? So really, at this point in my career, I tend to work mostly with executive teams. Okay? Because unless we change the culture, which comes from leaders, your point about people, you know, so you have to create the right ecosystem. Remember, in our we quadrant, we had culture. Nothing's going to change. Now, the interesting thing is that the higher we go up in the hierarchy, the more difficult it is to change. So leaders generally do not know what they ask for when they say, bring more agility into my organization. And when they realize what they've asked for, you know, there's generally shock and horror, and maybe it's not the right way for us to go. Or let's limit it to the practices, let's limit it to the it, because we're not going to fiddle with the it's, because what's going to happen to us? So the same thing that they are inflicting on people below them, I make them sound like really evil, huh? It's really difficult for them to go through, because change is actually a personal journey. Okay, this is a summary. Leonore Koeman, who was the head coach, this is a summary of what they were willing to give up. I'd like you to read that. So let's go on to the next myth. You don't need to change your structure to have organizational agility. So what I've got up there is the Facebook structure. And actually that's a reasonably flat structure. But this is what normally happens. So we start with a traditional hierarchy, and then we start doing Scrum. So now we still have the same hierarchy, but we've got a couple of, at the bottom we've got self-organizing teams. Okay, so now we need to scale it. So then we start doing Scrum of Scrums. So that level disappears as well. And eventually we realize, okay, there's a organizational structure, and then there's a shadow organizational structure. Okay, this is actually who needs to communicate with whom. So there are actually many more models than this. Okay, but some of the more well-known ones all sit in the holacracy, sociocracy area, where we have really flat structures. And if you really go to advanced organizations, they abandon sometimes that role right at the top, or they take turns in playing the role at the top. So this is, I don't know about you, but this is like wow stuff for me. We are so used to after so many years of being in hierarchical structures that this is a shock to the system. And we've been, two of us have been involved in being in a flat organizational structure like this for about 18 months. We have so much conditioned behavior that even though you've thought all your life, this is what you want and that's how you're going to function, you are so uncertain of yourself and how things work that it's really difficult to function in that. Okay, so at some point in time, unless you change your organizational structure, okay, which is really tough, unless you change your organizational structure, you're going to get stuck and you're not going to be able to go further. Okay, hang on. So, sorry, forgot about the arrows. So, we would think that it would be easy for us to change our organizational structures. Who of you know Craig Larman? Okay, so Craig Larman and Bas Vodde, they are the main creators of LESS, yes, a scaled, large-scale Scrum. Okay, and this is what he's observed. Well, it's a journey, because if we say flat structure, how many people do you know between the customer and the worker, or between the CEO and the worker, and what's going to happen to those people? So it's a real concern. It's a real concern, and it's not, what do we do about it? Well, the thing that we don't do about it is not talk about it. So we're talking about middle managers. We need to talk about what if we change our structure, what's going to happen to middle management, because otherwise this will happen. Do they find themselves something else to do? Do they go back and become real technical? I don't know whether you've heard about Target. Target has had a really successful agile change in the last 18 months. What they've done is they have abandoned in the IT, they've abandoned the structure in the IT department, and they've given people alternatives. They have found ways. So, very often in IT, we promote technical managers into management position, okay, and we have two evils. We lose somebody that's really good technical, and we put somebody in a management position that's not necessarily able to, interested in doing it in the first place, and also not really keen on developing themselves.
Peter's principle.
Yeah, the Peter principle too, yeah. So, okay, so this is not as easy, and this is, here be dragons. This, you need to have big kahunas if you want to go to changing the structure, because you are going to ruffle feathers. Okay, so myth number 6. We have to have a clear end destination in mind. So we have to have a defined end product in mind, and we need a clear path how to get there. Okay. So why do you think that's a myth?
You don't know the path.
You don't know the path, yes? You don't know the path?
It's all about Agile.
Okay, hang on 1 sec.
Also, the feedback-based mechanism fails. Like you make a little part of it, then
Yeah.
based on the feedback can actually improve.
Yeah.
So that scope of improvement actually dies in case you know
Yes.
what exactly happened. with the
Yes,
person.
yes. So do you see how we apply that principle that we know from Scrum teams? You know, we have 2 weeks and then we do a review and we see what we built and we do a retrospective and we see how it worked. That's in the macro. That's what we do in the macro with organizational agility as well. We generally start with where's the biggest problem and how do we solve that problem? Okay, and once we've solved that problem, where's the next biggest problem now that we've solved it? Okay, and where's the next biggest problem? Okay, so this idea of having this is where we're going to, and we plan to be there in 2 years, and these are the steps. And believe you me, as an enterprise coach, every single client that I do work for asks me for what's the plan. Okay, that's the first time where you get a chance to educate the client about how Agile works and what works it in. Right. So the last myth that I want to talk about is just the fact that we have stolen, as Agile coaches, we have stolen a whole bunch of things from a whole bunch of disciplines. Okay, Agile coaches, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Agile coaches will try and solve everything with Agile. But we've got a whole world out there that we need to borrow from. So somebody said change management, you said change management. So we've got change management, OD, organizational development, okay? LD, leadership development, okay? We've got product development. There are people out there who are professional product developers, okay? The world of professional coaching, learning and development. Oh, change is on there twice, okay? So it's absolutely, it's super important, okay? So do not think that as an Agile coach, enterprise coaches, by all means, they gather things. I mean, over the years, that's what the previous slide was, but I'm running out of time. So over the years, I've gone as a technical person, I've gone through umpteen trainings, getting knowledge and experience and training and experience and training and experience in many different disciplines, okay? But we're only scratching the surface. So that is very important, that you turn to others for help. And the last thing that's really important is you need to develop yourself as a leader, okay? You don't have to be an organizational leader to develop yourself as a leader. If you do not develop yourself as a leader, you will not be able to influence and work with organizational leaders in order to get them to take the next step. Okay, so there we go. There they are summarized.
I want to thank JP Morgan and Sakina for all the effort you put into tonight. and thank you, Antoinette. We should get Antoinette to get a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm so grateful, and I see a lot of repeating faces and some new faces. So really glad that we're becoming a community here and growing. So I want to thank you for taking your time to come out and. Yeah, come chat to me. There's ways to get involved with the community, and we offer loads of free resources. And as I said, we've got our training courses and everything. So yeah. Oh, and you get discounts for being part of the community. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.